Now, of course, you hear a lot of this on the news cycle, especially if you turn into Fox News or CNBC, whatever, it doesn't matter. You hear so much about the national debt. Now, it now stands at around $16 trillion and continues to rise. What many people don't know about the debt is most of that, around $12 trillion, is actually owed back to the American public. It is publicly held debt. And this comes from treasury bills held by American businesses, and even some foreign investors. Now, despite a pervasive belief by most of the American public, when asked, they think that China owns most of our debt. And of course, the real numbers prove otherwise. According to a CNN poll, like I said, many Americans think that the debt, China owns $1.2 trillion of American $16 trillion debt. When you think about it, China is not about to take us over from our debt. Most of that money borrowed, most of that $16 trillion is borrowed from the general fund, and that's from trust funds, including Social Security. The military gets the largest amount of spending in the general fund, and the reason that they can borrow from these from these trust funds because they're running positive numbers. So they're not in debt. Social Security is not in debt. It's not in danger. It is in the positive, and that's why our politicians continue to borrow money from it to fund general programs like military, tax cuts, Medicare Part D. According to a CNN poll, like I said, many Americans think that the debt is also due to spending on foreign aid. That actually only makes up 1% of federal spending. According to the Center of Budget and Policy Priorities, in 2012, Social Security made up 22% of the federal spending. However, Social Security is fully funded. And like I said before, and I want to stress this, it does not add a penny to the debt and the deficit. It just doesn't. It is fully funded. Defense makes up 19% of the budget, and then following is Medicare, Medicaid, and CHIP, and that makes up 21% of the federal budget. And the social safety net, the thing that conservatives love to rail against, makes up 12% of the federal budget. Now, despite the fact that programs like Social Security are fully funded, and once again, don't add a penny to the debt, they have been continuously attacked by conservatives and even some Democrats, with President Barack Obama putting Social Security on the table in the coming debt negotiations to resolve the sequester. Austerity has been the norm. And we've seen places where austerity has been implemented. It's been implemented in Europe and Greece, and it is even begun to be implemented here, like I said, with the sequester. However, and these are some pretty new developments, recently a grad student from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, a man named Thomas Herndon, tried to replicate a famous study that supports austerity. It was written by two Harvard economists, Carmen Reinhart and Kenneth Rogoff. Their book, Growth in the Time of Debt, basically purports to show that once a country's gross debt to GDP ratio crosses the threshold of 90%, economic growth slows dramatically. And this study, this book, by these two economists, had been used by people like Paul Ryan in his Path to Prosperity budget. That budget would impose harsh austerity measures on America, a lot of which happened in Europe. They've embraced austerity, and Paul Ryan wants to continue to bring us back to austerity. Herndon and two others, Michael Ash and Robert Pullen, were unable to successfully replicate the study, so they asked to see the Excel spreadsheet used by Reinhart and Rogoff to replicate. And when they were able to see that spreadsheet, they discovered some errors. These errors included coding errors, selective exclusion of available data, and unconventional weighting of summary statistics that led to some serious errors that inaccurately represent the relationship between public debt and GDP growth, and that's among 20 advanced economies in the post-war period. They find that when properly calculated, the average real GDP growth rate for countries carrying a public debt to GDP ratio of over 90% was actually positive at 2.2%, not what the study had originally said. And it also says that, contrary to what Reinhardt and Rogoff had said, average GDP growth at public debt to GDP ratios over 90% are not dramatically different than when the debt to GDP ratio is actually lower.